Hi folks, this is Chris Voss from thechrisvossshow.com, thechrisvossshow.com. I want to share a blog post here with you. One of the aspects of being a entrepreneur is it brings out a whole new level of aptitude that you have to reach as a person. And there's a lot of qualities you have to develop. A lot of it's self-actualization, self-reliance, etc., etc. One thing I want to share with you here is you really have to learn to be a good judge, especially if you're going to have lots of employees. Being a good judge is a very important aspect of being a successful entrepreneur, because a lot of times you can be put in situations where not only you're making decisions about your business, you're making decisions about people's lives and employees. You're going to have cases where employees are going to have disagreements. You're going to have to deal with who's right, who's wrong, who has the best story. Sometimes you're like a police cop where you're sitting around going, okay, you go over there and you go over there. And, okay, you tell me your story and you tell me. And so it's kind of like being a king sometimes. It's that old King Solomon approach. I've had employees before me, and you're trying to figure out which one of them is wrong, and you're sitting there going, I'm just going to cut this damn baby in half. There's been times where I've had two employees that are completely out of line, and I'm trying to get everybody to get along and everybody get back to work, and I finally come out and, like King Solomon, I just go, look, I'm not going to sit here and figure out which one of you is right, which one of you is wrong. I'll tell you what I will do. I will fire both of you if you just don't get your acts together, get back to work, and learn to get along. So maybe you should learn to fear me a little bit more at losing your job than you should fear arguing amongst yourselves and each other, because if I have to, I'll settle it for you. I know that sounds a little tough, but if you've been in situations where you have two employees flipping out against each other, it gets pretty crazy. One of the first sexual harassment complaints we ever had with one of our companies was actually two guys. One guy was gay and the other guy wasn't, and turned out the guy who wasn't gay was offended just by the presence of the other guy, and it was a very homophobic, stupid thing. But it was very real. We had to deal with it, and I always thought my first sexual harassment thing would come from male-female situation. You get exposed to a lot of things, and so if there's one thing to probably prepare you for, learn to be a good judge of people, learn to be a good judge of character. You may want to take classes on body language, understanding what people are doing, what their motives are. I think I would have, in my day and age now, I would be able to determine which employees I could trust, which I couldn't, which had, try to identify their values. But being a good judge is really important. And unfortunately in business, sometimes you have to make some calls at a very gut level. And it's really important that you've educated, that you develop yourself up to that point to be able to be a real good judge. And we talked also about how important it is to operate in reality, or reality, the closest you can to reality, because obviously you're not in reality, you can't be a good judge. Now, we'll talk about environment and how to have a good, moral thing going on in your office here in the future. But I'll tell you a story that's kind of an interesting story, and I have quite a few of them. I had an employee who was in my office, and he had a drinking problem. He was going out and hitting the bottle way too much. And some of my employees from one of the other departments came to me, and they go, look, he's sometimes in the afternoon so drunk that he can stand beside you and you can get drunk off of his breath. And I'm like, really? We haven't noticed that. So we started monitoring for it and eventually picked up on it. And, we wrote him up once, wrote him up twice, all that good stuff. And then finally we fired him. And I brought him in my office, sat him down, said, look, we can't have this. You're getting drunk on the property, blah, blah, blah. His sales had gone down. And so I sent him with his final check. And in those days, we used to be really good. We just, give him a check to get rid of him. Tony Heisch from Zappos.com talks about this in a book where he would actually offer employees $2,000 to leave. And I really love that idea, because if someone wants to go, it's even more incentive for them to go. Why have them stand around and sabotage your business? Let them get out the door. Those usually unhappy people are going to suck everywhere they go. So, anyway, he goes out the door. Well, he goes out the door. About half an hour later, one of my other employees comes in, and he goes, Chris, I really want to be honest with you, and I just found out some information of the guy you just fired. Well, let's call him Bradley. You may want to know this information. when he left, he sat out and we were having a smoke, and he told me that he'd taken 4 mortgage loans to another mortgage lender, and he'd gotten paid in full for those loans. He basically embezzled or stole company revenue products and took them someplace else to get them done, and he got paid in full, where with us he would only get paid maybe half the commissions. And here I'd sent the kid down the check with this, with the check and all this sort of good stuff. So I called him up and left a message, and I said, I just had this employee tell me this interesting story that you left and you embezzled some of our interest and money. And I'd really like you to call me back and just clarify the story with me. But I got to be real honest with you, and this is, of course, what I left on his voicemail. I got to be really honest with you. The fact that you would tell a story when you're leaving like that, I'm kind of on the fence. Like, did you tell it because you're bragging, or did you tell it because you really stole from us? And I said, just so you know, I'm going to give you 24 hours to call me back, and if I don't have you calling me back by tonight, I will be putting a stop payment on the check. So just so you know, the check will bounce, and I'll put a stop payment on that check. So I need you to call me back and just clarify this issue. And I was very nice. I don't try and attack and accuse people until I really get proof. And that's the important part of being a judge, too. You need to sit back, you need to collect all the data, and then you need to make an educated, intelligent decision. So I never heard back from him. I even put another call into him because that's how gracious I am. And I said, look, just so you know, it appears that you're not going to call me back and discuss this issue with me. I will be canceling the check. So I canceled the check. Didn't hear back for like a week and a half or so. Didn't hear anything. And I just kind of went, I wonder what went down. So, sure enough, after a week and a half, I get this frantic call from him, practically crying on the phone. Oh my God, all my checks are bouncing, blah, blah, blah. Oh, what did you do? And I need you to pay me, and I need you to pay for the bounce checks and all this stuff. And I said, well, Bradley, we gave you an opportunity to tell us, this story that you told our employees. He's like, I just told him a story, and I just did it to lash out at you and make it seem like it was cool, even though you were firing me. And I said, and on one hand, I was kind of like, well, maybe I'm just being an asshole. But on the other hand, I'm like, why would you tell that story? And number two, you would have called me back and just said, hey, Chris, don't put a stop payment on my check. I was just being an asshole, okay? The reason he didn't call me back is because he was giving me the FU, and he didn't care. So he's sitting there crying. I go, dude, I got to tell you, it's your story. You stuck with it. Well, I'll sue you. Well, go ahead and sue me because you got an interesting story, and we're going to go through your loans. We're going to figure out which loans disappeared. And so, in the end, I wouldn't pay him his money, and, all that good stuff. I felt really guilty about that. That night I went home, and I went, I'm really going to hate myself if I find out that maybe he just told a story and did it. But he dug that grave. He dug it for himself. And for several months after that, it really bothered me. And I thought, God, did I do the right thing? And this is important about being a judge, being able to consider if you did the right thing, because sometimes you don't always do the right thing. Very interesting thing. 4 months later, I went to this convention, happened to bump into a guy totally by chance, meets me and who I am, and he goes, oh, you're Chris Voss, you own that company. He goes, hey, we had this guy named Bradley who brought us 4 loans. He said you guys couldn't do them, and we paid him, and he was supposed to pay you your guys' split. Did he pay you your guys' split? It was the most chance meeting I could ever have, but it was amazing, and it blew me away. And I'm like, no, he actually ripped us off and never paid us. And he was like, oh, wow, I can't believe that. So in the end, turns out my judgment was right. Very important that you have your judgment in place, and you're a good judge of character. You're a good judge of people at being a self-employed business person, because you're going to have to make calls about people and their livelihood, and you're going to have to live with those calls too, which is part of being a judge. So work as hard as you can to be a good one. Develop your personality. Make sure you're the best person that you can be too, because you've got to be smarter than most people if you're going to be a judge. Thanks for coming by the ChrisVossShow.com.